Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas and you're watching Empire Building. The long-awaited halvening is finally upon us. There have been countless YouTube videos covering this topic. As always, I wanted to be able to deliver a unique perspective. So I turned to the data to see if there was anything there that could suggest that this event might be different than any of the previous events. Let me tell you, the data did not disappoint. And I find it surprising that nobody seems to be talking about this. Contrary to popular opinion, this halving event is not like any of the ones that have come before it. And in my opinion, could be far more bullish than people are expecting. Anyone that's been following my channel so far knows that I like charts. So I promise not to disappoint in this one, so long as you promise to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. So what's different about this halving? Well, it all has to do with the hash rate and the role of the miners. So, let's get into the charts. This is a chart of the hash rate on the Bitcoin network against the price since just before the all-time highs back at the end of 2017. Now, let's just take a moment to appreciate that the hash rate has increased 8.5-fold since those highs. Following that bubble bursting, the hash rate continued to increase until the end of October of 2018, when the miners began to capitulate as the price finally dropped below $6,000 and stayed there. The hash rate dropped about 44% and took 6 months for the hash rate to return to those former highs. Of course, as price continued to rise, so did the hash rate. It should be noted that a good portion of this increase that we're seeing here is due to the increase in efficiency of ASIC mining equipment that have come to market. The most important fact to take away from this is that there is a clear correlation between the hash rate and the price of Bitcoin when the price drops below specific levels. This is obviously due to the fact that not all miners are profitable once the price drops below those levels. So they stop mining until the price rises again. This became painfully clear again when the price literally cut in half overnight on March 11th of this year. As would be expected, the hash rate dropped by 36% from peak to trough. This is important to note because it means that the Bitcoin network is currently operating at or near saturation. What I mean by saturation is that, generally speaking, for many miners, the cost to mine one Bitcoin is nearly one Bitcoin. Now let's go back to the last halving event, which occurred on July 9th, 2016. Even with the flash crash that followed the halving, the hash rate still continued to climb. In fact, throughout the entire cycle from the 2014 highs until the prices returned to that level at the start of 2017, the hash rate continued to climb without any significant interruption. The same was true for the first halving event. So it doesn't take a genius to predict that following this halving event, there will be a significant drop in the hash rate on the Bitcoin network. Since we've already seen 2 instances indicating that for many miners, the cost to mine one Bitcoin is nearly one Bitcoin. Now it is true that the profitability will get cut in half as soon as the halving takes place, but that only means that a large percentage of the miners will leave the network and the time to mine the next block will increase. This will slow down the network, but the network will automatically detect this and reduce the difficulty at the next difficulty adjustment, which should be about a week following the halving. Of course, the drop in hash rate will actually push that date out, but eventually we'll get there and the difficulty will be reduced and we'll find a new equilibrium as things start to balance out. So this is where it gets interesting because this has never happened during a halving event, as I pointed out before. There will be a large percentage of miners sitting on very expensive equipment that they can't afford to run because it's cheaper for them to just buy the coin. The impact of this is twofold. First, generally, miners sell nearly all of the coins that they mine to pay for the electricity and facility costs for their operations. Now that there will be half as many coins mined every block, that's half as many coins that can make it to the open market. Now, this is true for previous halving events, so it doesn't set this one apart. What's different about this time is that all those miners that are sitting on the sidelines may decide to buy those coins, at least until it's cheaper for them to mine it again. Nothing here is guaranteed, but my prediction is that we'll see significant volatility following the halving, but the overall trend will be up. And I think it will happen faster and go higher than most people are prepared for. Do not underestimate the miners. It has always been and always will be the miners who validate the price of Bitcoin, since they are spending nearly that amount just to mine one Bitcoin. The fact that we now know that we have reached saturation on the network going into the halving should set you very bullish. So many people are expecting this to be a sell the news event. Well, I got news for you. The halving is not news. Everybody knows it's coming. Just look at Google Trends for the word halving over the last 5 years. This time we are dwarfing the last event. The next thing that people tend to say is that if everyone knows it's coming, then it must already be priced in, right? Well, of course it's priced in. But that doesn't matter. The price will still rise after the halving. Anyone that is fully convinced that the price will drop for either of these two reasons does not fully understand the economics of Bitcoin. I'll say it again. Do not underestimate the miners. From the very first block, it has been the miners that have perpetuated the value of Bitcoin. They are the only true market makers. When you look at Bitcoin's more established history, there have been very few instances where there have been substantial drops in hash rate. And following those events, prices always stabilized, followed by very large moves to the upside. But this is the first time we will witness substantial miner capitulation coupled with a halving event. The halving is a massive catalyst for Bitcoin, mainly due to the increased scarcity. It's also worth noting that in addition to block rewards, miners also collect transaction fees from those transacting on the blockchain. Those fees are determined by the open market as well. And at the height of the bubble, those fees skyrocketed to an average of $55 per transaction. I would expect that the fees will increase following the halving as well, since the reduced hash rate will mean transactions will take longer to validate. Those wanting faster validations will pay more for their transactions to be verified first. This will also help compensate miners, but the effect will be temporary until the difficulty adjusts to increase the number of blocks per hour. Now, if that went straight over your head, don't worry about it too much. I mention it just because it does have an impact on the internal economics of Bitcoin, and eventually, block rewards will disappear altogether, and miners will rely entirely on transaction fees, as no more Bitcoin will be created once we reach 21 million. But that's not going to happen for another 120 years, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. The real question you should be asking yourself is, what do you think the price will be at the next halving? That's the kind of horizon you should have in mind. In my opinion, there's not much reason to believe that you'll get an opportunity to buy at a lower price following the halving than you will now. That's not to say that it can't happen, but the basics of economics when it comes to supply and demand are pretty clear. If demand remains constant and supply is reduced, then the supply curve on this graph moves to the left, which pushes the new equilibrium price up. The point I am arguing is that the demand curve could also shift to the right due to unprofitable miners looking to buy Bitcoin for lower than they can mine it for. Even if they don't, and instead they choose to do nothing at all, this is also bullish because they no longer will have high electricity bills to pay, so they will have no need to sell any more of the Bitcoin they currently have, further reducing the supply on the market. Also, and this next point cannot be overstated, we are in the midst of a paradigm-shifting event, the likes of which the world has never seen before. Governments all over the world are printing more money than ever before. 11 years after Bitcoin's creation, we are witnessing a repeat of history that also just happens to coincide with a halving event. How will the world respond to this? Just the other day, we heard from Paul Tudor, the billionaire hedge fund manager, who says that a single-digit percentage of his fund is invested in Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation. He says, and I quote, "The best maximizing strategy is to own the fastest horse. If I am forced to forecast, my bet is it will be Bitcoin. For me, I don't have to make the choice to go all in before the halving, because I made that choice back in March. And it's worked out pretty good for me so far. But there is no way on God's green earth that I would bet against all of these forces by selling a single one of my positions. I will be watching the outcome of this very closely. And if there is a dip, it will most likely be the last chance you will ever see to buy the dip. You can see there is not much time left until the halving arrives. I imagine there will be countdown parties online like it was New Year's Eve. For me here in Canada, it looks like it'll be happening sometime on Monday evening. So I'll crack open a beer and I'll watch it take place. I'm sure the moment itself will be quite uneventful, but all the same, it deserves my attention. Till then, I'll be getting back to empire building. If you enjoyed this content, then please subscribe for future videos and hit the like button. It'll help support a new and growing channel. Thank you, and I'll see you on the flip side. Bye.